The chandelier exploded in a storm of glass when Damien Kessler fired 3 rounds into the ceiling, and before the screaming stopped, he had already crossed the lobby, seized Victoria Hayes by the back of the neck, and slammed her face down onto the marble reception desk. "Everybody on the floor," he shouted. "Nobody dies tonight unless she decides otherwise." 300 people dropped, all except one. A tired man in a maintenance jacket sat frozen at table 19 with his 8-year-old daughter's hand in his and quietly began counting exits. Because what Kessler didn't know was that the janitor he'd just walked past had a service record the Pentagon had sealed twice. Before we begin, comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you believe some men never stop being protectors, subscribe. You'll want to be here for what happens next. At 8:47 that evening, Ethan Cole was arguing with an 8-year-old about pancakes. "Dad, Dad, Dad. I heard you the first 3 times, Lily." "Then why aren't you answering?" "Because I'm thinking about how to say no in a way that doesn't make me the bad guy." Lily Cole folded her arms on the table, the way her mother used to, and Ethan felt that familiar knife slide between his ribs and out again. "It's Friday," she said. "It's Friday," he agreed. "Friday is pancake night." Friday was pancake night, when we had a house with a stove that worked. The stove works. The stove works sometimes. That's not the same thing. She stared at him. He stared back. He lost the way he always lost, and he'd stopped pretending otherwise around the time she turned 6. "Fine," he said. "Pancakes, but you're eating the eggs first." "Deal." "And you're not telling Grandma I let you have syrup twice." "Deal harder." He almost laughed. That was the thing nobody understood about Ethan Cole. Not the guys on the maintenance crew. Not the woman at the school pickup line, who always looked at him with that specific brand of pity reserved for widowers. They saw a 38-year-old man with grease on his knuckles and a daughter who wore mismatched socks, and they thought, poor guy barely holding it together. They were half right. He was barely holding it together. But he was holding it. They were sitting in the restaurant off the lobby of the Grand Meridian, because the hotel comped its maintenance staff 1 meal a shift, and because Ethan's apartment was 40 minutes north in traffic, and Lily had homework she'd forgotten, and he had 4 more hours on the clock. That was the whole reason. Nothing else. No fate, no destiny, none of the things people would say about it later on television. A man just wanted his kid to eat something before 9 o'clock. "Are you working late again?" Lily asked. "Till 1. That's super late. It's how the light bill stays on." "Mrs. Alvarez says I can stay over." "Mrs. Alvarez says a lot of things. Half of them she means." Lily giggled and stabbed a piece of egg. Ethan glanced at the clock over the bar, 8:51, and then out through the restaurant's glass partition into the lobby where the Grand Meridian was quietly losing its mind. The Halvorsen Group's annual Investors Gala was upstairs in the Grand Ballroom. 240 guests. Black tie. A step-and-repeat banner near the elevators with a logo Ethan had helped hang that afternoon on a ladder that wobbled. Waiters cutting through the lobby with trays balanced like they were being graded on it. The night manager, a nervous kid named Petrov, who couldn't have been 30, pacing near the concierge desk with a radio in his hand and a look on his face like a man waiting for a verdict. And near the elevators, a woman in a charcoal suit having an argument in a voice too low to hear. Ethan noticed her the way he noticed everything, which was to say without meaning to. Victoria Hayes. He knew the name because it had been on the event sheet. He knew the face because she'd been on the cover of a magazine somebody left in the break room under a headline about the woman taking on Wall Street. In the photograph, she'd looked untouchable. In person, she looked like a woman who hadn't slept in 9 days. She had a phone pressed to her ear and one hand pressed flat against the elevator panel like she needed it to hold her up. "I don't care what he threatened," she was saying. "I don't care. If I hand it over, we lose everything. Everything, Daniel. 6 years. Ethan looked away. It wasn't his business. He had a kid and a mop closet and a shift. "Dad," Lily said, "your face is doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you're looking at something, but pretending you're not." Ethan turned back to his daughter. "You're 8. I'm almost 9. You're 8.5 and you notice too much. You noticed first, she said and shoveled in another bite. He'd remember that later. He'd remember it for years. At 9:02, Victoria Hayes hung up the phone, pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes for exactly 2 seconds, and then straightened her spine like she was pulling armor back on. She walked toward the ballroom. At 9:07, the hotel's front doors locked. Nobody in the restaurant heard it. It wasn't a sound so much as an absence of one, the soft mechanical chunk of a magnetic lock, engaging the kind of noise you only notice if you've spent your life noticing. Ethan's head came up. Dad, eat your eggs. At 9:09, the freight elevator alarm should have chimed. It didn't. At 9:11, the music in the lobby cut out mid-song. And at 9:15, Damien Kessler walked through the service corridor with 6 men behind him and fired 3 rounds into the ceiling of the Grand Meridian lobby. The sound hit like a physical thing. Ethan had Lily on the floor before the glass finished falling, one arm around her ribs, one hand cupping the back of her skull. His own body turned so that everything between her and the lobby was him. He didn't decide to do it. There was no decision. There was a noise, and then there was his daughter underneath him, and 11 years of nothing in between. Dad. Dad. Shh. Dad, what was... Shh. Look at me. Look right at me. Breathe out. She breathed out. Again. She breathed out again, and her whole small body was shaking, and Ethan held her and listened, screaming first. Then the screaming turned into something worse. The ragged, stumbling sound of 300 people trying to be quiet at the same time. Then a voice. Amplified. Calm. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like everyone's attention, please. Ethan lifted his head 2 inches. The man in the center of the lobby wasn't shouting. That was the first thing. He had a rifle slung across his chest, and he wore no mask at all, and he was speaking into a handheld PA unit like a wedding coordinator running late. My name doesn't matter, the man said. What matters is the next 90 minutes. In 90 minutes, most of you will walk out of this building. That's a promise. I've never broken one. A woman near the fountain was sobbing. He waited for her to finish. But some of you, he continued, are going to try to be clever. You'll try a side door. You'll try a phone. You'll try to be a hero. He paused. Don't. I've buried heroes. They're heavy. And then he turned and he grabbed Victoria Hayes. She'd been 10 feet from the ballroom doors. He caught her by the back of the neck and put her down on the reception desk hard enough that the sound carried across the lobby, and Ethan felt his own jaw lock. Ms. Hayes, Kessler said pleasantly. You're a hard woman to schedule with. Get your hands off me. I will, in about 4 seconds. He leaned down. You know why I'm here. I know you're going to prison. Kessler laughed, a real laugh, warm, almost fond. That's good. That's a good line. You practice that. Get off. He let her up. That surprised Ethan more than anything else. He let her up, and he straightened her collar for her, and he stepped back a respectful distance, like a man who'd just helped a stranger with a fallen bag. Here's the arrangement, Kessler said. You have something. I want it. You're going to give it to me, and then I'm going to leave, and 300 people are going to go home and tell this story at Thanksgiving for the rest of their lives. He tilted his head. Or you're going to be stubborn, and then this becomes a different kind of night. You won't do it, Victoria said. Not here. Not with this many witnesses. Kessler smiled. Ms. Hayes, he said. Look around. Do I look like a man who's worried about witnesses? Gimrand. Under table 19. Ethan Cole was counting. He didn't want to be. He'd spent 11 years not counting. He'd built an entire life, a job, an apartment, a school district, a Friday pancake tradition on the foundation of not counting. But his eyes moved anyway, and the numbers came up anyway, and there was nothing he could do about it. 7 shooters visible. 2 at the front doors, static covering the glass. 1 at the elevator bank. 1 at the ballroom stairs. 2 circulating. 1 with the PA. No masks. That was the number that mattered. That was the one that turned his stomach to ice water. 7 armed men who don't care if you see their faces. Dad. Lily's voice tiny. Your hands are shaking. I know, sweetheart. You're never scared. I'm scared all the time, he said. I'm just good at the other part. What other part? Doing it anyway. Somebody was crawling toward them between the tables. Ethan tensed, then relaxed a fraction when he saw who it was. Walter Briggs was 74 years old, wore a hearing aid he refused to admit he needed, and had eaten dinner at the Grand Meridian every Friday for 11 years because his wife had liked the bread pudding, and she'd been gone since 2019. Ethan had fixed the man's chair once. They'd talked for an hour. Son, Walter whispered, settling in beside them with a wince. Bad knee, don't judge me. Get down, Walter. I am down. This is as down as I get. The old man looked at Lily and softened. Hey there, sweetheart. You all right? Lily shook her head. Yeah, Walter said. Me neither. He looked back at Ethan. You were counting. Ethan went still. Don't give me that face, Walter said. I did 2 tours in a place they didn't put on the map. I know a man counting when I see one. His eyes went to the lobby, then back. How many? 7 that I can see. How many that you can't? 2, maybe 3. Somebody killed the freight elevator alarm, and somebody killed the music, and those aren't the same guy. Walter exhaled slowly. Christ. Walter. Yeah. Don't tell anybody I said that. The old man looked at him for a long moment. Something passed behind his eyes, an assessment, a recalculation. The look of a man revising 11 years of assumptions in about 4 seconds. Maintenance, Walter said. Maintenance, Ethan agreed. Sure. Out in the lobby. Kessler was still talking, and Ethan was still listening, and the listening was the thing that changed everything, because it wasn't the words, it was the pauses. Reyes, sweep the west corridor. Copy. Brant, you've got the stairwell. Nobody comes down. Nobody goes up. Copy. Copy. Not yeah. Not got it. Not the nervous overtalking of men doing something illegal for the first time. Copy. One word. Radio discipline. The kind you don't invent, the kind that gets drilled into you until it replaces your own instincts. Ethan watched the man called Reyes move toward the west corridor, and his stomach dropped through the floor. The man cut the corner wide, muzzle down and away from his own team. He paused at the doorframe, pied the corner, cleared it in a smooth, economical arc that didn't waste a single step. That's not a criminal, Ethan thought. That's a graduate. He shifted to see the front doors. 2 men. Not standing together, standing at an angle 20 feet apart, covering each other's blind side without having to be told. One watched the glass. One watched the room. Neither of them had looked at each other once in 6 minutes. Walter, Ethan said quietly. Yeah. Look at the 2 at the door. Tell me what you see. Walter looked. It took him 10 seconds. Aw, hell, he breathed. Yeah. They're not robbing this place. No. Then what are they? Walter. Ethan's voice was very calm and very flat, and Lily looked up at him because she'd never heard it before. How many robbers do you know who don't wear masks? The old man's mouth opened, closed. Nobody wears a mask, Ethan said, when nobody's left to describe them. Victoria Hayes had been running the numbers too. Not the same numbers. She didn't know what a stack was, or a sector, or what it meant that the man at the elevator bank kept his support hand indexed along the rail instead of the trigger. But she knew people, and she knew money, and she'd spent 6 years learning exactly how far Reginald Sloane would go to protect what he'd built. She'd told herself it wouldn't be this far. She'd been wrong about that. You know, Kessler said, walking her slowly toward the reception desk. I read your file. I have a file. Everybody has a file. Yours is better than most. He gestured, almost admiring. Orphaned at 11. Foster care in Rockford. Scholarship kid at Northwestern. Made partner at 31, walked away at 32. He glanced at her. Why'd you walk? Because I found out what we were doing. And you couldn't live with it? No. See, that's your problem, Kessler said. Everybody can live with it. That's the whole trick. Most people just haven't been offered enough yet. He stopped. You were offered $40 million 8 months ago. You said no. Victoria's head snapped up. Yeah, Kessler said softly. I know about that too. You work for him. I work for whoever signs. He shrugged. Tonight it's him. Then you know what's on that drive. I don't want to know what's on that drive. Knowing what's on the drive is how a man ends up on somebody's list. He held out his hand, palm up. Give it to me, and I'll walk you out that door myself. Personally, I'll put you in a cab. And everyone here goes home. You're lying. Kessler didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He just looked at her with something almost like sadness. Ms. Hayes, he said, you're a smart woman having a very stupid night. Everyone in this room is going home if you cooperate. That's not a lie. That's a condition. He lowered his hand. The lie is the part where you think you have leverage. And then he turned to the room and raised the PA. Mr. Petrov, he called. Night manager, stand up please. Nobody moved. Mr. Petrov, I have your employee file in my hand. I know you're here. Stand up. Slowly near the concierge desk. The kid stood. He was shaking so badly he had to hold the desk. Thank you, Kessler said. What's your first name? Dmitri. Dmitri, how long have you worked here? 2 years. Please I have. Everybody has Dmitri. Kessler turned back to Victoria. This man has a wife named Anna and a son who turns 4 in November. That's not a threat. That's a fact. I want you to hold both of those facts in your head while you decide how stubborn you're feeling. Victoria's face went white. Don't. I haven't done anything yet. You want the drive, I want the drive and the key, Kessler said. Both. Split key encryption. You gave 1/2 to a journalist in Boston. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise. Victoria stopped breathing. Kessler watched her stop breathing and nodded satisfied. There she is, he said. That's the face of a woman who just understood how thoroughly she's been mapped. Under the table. Lily Cole was crying without making any sound at all, which was the worst thing Ethan had ever seen in his life, and he had seen a number of things. Hey, he whispered. Hey, Lilybug, look at me. She looked. You know what your mom used to say? She shook her head. She used to say the scariest part is always the part where you don't know what's happening. He wiped her face with his thumb. But I know what's happening, so you don't have to. You do. I do. What's happening? Ethan hesitated for exactly half a second. Bad men want something from that lady out there, he said. And they're going to be here a little while. And then it's going to be over, and we're going to go home, and I'm going to make you the worst pancakes you have ever eaten in your life. With the burned edges. With the burned edges. You promise. And there it was. He'd made a promise like this once before. 11 years ago, in a hospital room in San Diego, to a woman with a bruise-colored crescent under each eye, and a hand so thin he'd been afraid to hold it. I'll be here, I promise. He'd flown 11,000 miles to keep that one, and he'd walked in the door 4 hours late. He had never made a promise since. Not one. Not about Christmas, not about the school play, not about anything. I promise, Ethan said. Walter Briggs turned his face away. Teke, Reyes. Go. Where are we on the ballroom? 240 upstairs, consolidated seated. Brant's holding the stair. Devices. A pause on the radio, the first pause Ethan had heard. 4 of 6 placed. Timeline. 20 minutes. Ethan's hand tightened around Lily's shoulder. Devices. He replayed it 3 times. 4 of 6 placed. Not 4 of 6 checked. Not searched. Placed. They weren't clearing the building. They were preparing it. Ethan pressed his forehead against the tablecloth for 1 second and let himself feel the entire weight of it. The whole shape of the night laid out complete in his head like a map somebody had shoved into his hands. They came in through the service corridor. They killed the alarms first, then the music, then the door's utilities before contact. They aren't wearing masks. They're rigging the building. They have a hard timeline, and they're consolidating hostages upstairs away from the exits. They're not planning an escape. They're planning a scene. Something they could point at afterward. Something that would explain on the news why a whistleblower and every person who'd been near her had stopped existing on the same night. Ethan. Walter's voice hoarse. Son, what is it? Your face just changed. Walter. Yeah. How fast can you move? On this knee, not fast. Then you don't move, you stay flat. When it starts, you don't get up, you don't look, you don't be brave. The old man stared at him. When what starts? Ethan didn't answer, because at that exact moment, a pair of boots stopped 6 feet from their table. On your feet. The gunman's name was Reyes. Ethan knew that now. Reyes was maybe 35 wide through the shoulders, and he held the rifle low and relaxed the way you hold something you've carried for years. The restaurant guests began to stand slowly, shaking hands up. A waiter. 2 women in cocktail dresses. A businessman who'd wet himself and didn't seem to know it yet. Everybody in this room up. We're moving you to the ballroom. Ethan didn't move. You, Reyes said. Under the table. Up. My daughter's under here. I don't care. She's 8. Then she can walk. Ethan came out slowly. He kept one hand up. He kept the other on Lily tucked behind his hip, and he made himself into the smallest and dullest thing in the room. Shoulders, rounded chin, down eyes on the floor. A maintenance guy. A nobody in a work jacket. Don't look at his hands. Don't count. Don't do the thing. He counted anyway. Rifle slung high ready. Sidearm, strong hip retention holster. Thumb brake, already popped. 2 spare magazines chest. Radio left shoulder. No name tape, no patch, no unit marking anywhere sterile. Boot laces double knotted and tucked. Nobody tucks their laces unless somebody screamed at them about it for a year. Reyes looked at him. Just looked. 2 seconds. 3. And Ethan felt it, the tiny, terrible click of recognition. Not of him. Of a type. The way one dog knows another across a street. What do you do here? Reyes asked. Maintenance. Maintenance. HVAC mostly, some electrical. You always eat with your back to the wall. Maintenance. Ethan's heart went off like a hammer against his sternum. Best seat for the TV, he said. Reyes's eyes flicked to the wall behind them. There was no TV. The silence went on for a very long time. Then, Lily Cole stepped out from behind her father's leg, looked straight up at a man holding a rifle and said, He's not eating. He didn't even finish. He always makes me finish. Reyes looked down at her. Something in the man's face moved, some small door opening and shutting so fast that Ethan almost missed it. How old are you? Reyes asked. 8.5. I got a boy. He's 6. Is he here? No, Reyes said. He's not here. He looked back at Ethan for one more second. Then he jerked his chin toward the lobby. Ballroom, both of you, move. Ethan moved. He kept Lily in front of him, his hand flat between her shoulder blades, and he walked out into the ruined lobby with his head down and his heart going like a jackhammer, and every step he took the numbers kept coming and would not stop. 7 visible, 2 unseen, 6 devices, 4 placed 20 minutes. Ballroom is upstairs, 1 stairwell, 1 elevator bank, both covered. 240 people already up there. 310 total once they consolidate. 310 people in a room with 1 exit and a man who doesn't wear a mask. Ahead of him near the reception desk, Victoria Hayes turned and watched the restaurant crowd being herded across the lobby. Her eyes moved over them. The waiter, the crying women, the businessman, and stopped on the little girl in mismatched socks, and then on the man behind her. He wasn't looking at the guns. That was what Victoria noticed, and she noticed it because she'd spent 20 minutes watching 100 people do nothing but look at the guns. He was looking at the ceiling, at the sprinkler heads, at the seam where the ballroom stairwell met the mezzanine, at the service door behind the concierge desk, and then at the second one behind the coat check, and then back at the first. He was looking at a building. Victoria Hayes felt something she had absolutely no right to feel in that lobby on that night, with a man's hand still bruising the back of her neck. She felt a flicker of hope. Then Kessler's radio crackled. Kess, 5 of 6. Copy. Move the last one to the mezzanine. Understood. And Kessler brought the PA up to his mouth one more time, and his voice rolled out over 300 people climbing a staircase with their hands on their heads. Ms. Hayes has 10 minutes to make a decision, he said. I'd encourage all of you to hope she makes the right one. Ethan Cole. 7 steps up the ballroom stairs with his daughter's hand in his, and 11 years of a quiet life burning down. Behind him closed his eyes. I promised her pancakes. He opened them. And the man who had walked away from a war in order to be a father stopped walking away. At 9:31 p.m., the ballroom doors closed behind 310 people, and Ethan Cole learned the second thing that changed the night. They didn't lock them. He noticed because he was watching for it. He'd spent the whole climb up that staircase waiting for the sound of a bolt throwing a chain, a chair wedged under a handle, anything. Instead, the last man through simply pulled the doors shut and stood in front of them with his rifle low across his chest and his eyes moving in a slow bored arc across the crowd. Walter, Ethan said quietly. Right here. They didn't lock the doors. That's good, isn't it? No. Why isn't that good? Because you lock a door when you're afraid of what's behind it. Ethan settled Lily down onto the carpet against the back wall, keeping her between himself and the corner. They're not afraid of us. They just don't want us wandering into whatever they're doing out there. Walter lowered himself down with a grunt that he tried very hard to make quiet. So what are they doing out there? Finishing. Finishing what? Ethan didn't answer that one either. 240 gala guests in evening wear were sitting on a ballroom floor that had cost more than Ethan's car. 70 more from downstairs. Waiters. A bartender. A woman still holding a clutch purse like it was going to matter. Somebody in the middle of the room was praying out loud, and somebody near her told them to shut up and then immediately apologized. Sorry, I'm sorry I didn't mean. It's okay. I've got a daughter at Northwestern. It's okay. Ethan let the noise wash over him, and he worked. The ballroom had 4 sets of doors. Main doors where the gunman stood. 2 service doors flanking the head table, both of which led to the catering corridor, both of which he'd walked through 100 times with a tool bag. And an emergency exit at the far northeast corner, alarmed opening onto the fire stair. That one was propped. Not open. Propped maybe an inch with something dark wedged at the base. Ethan stared at it for a long moment before he understood, and when he understood, his mouth went dry. They'd disabled the alarm and propped the door because they were going to need to move through it fast at the end. Not the hostages. Them. Dad. Yeah, Bug. Everyone's crying. I know. Why aren't you crying? Ethan looked at his daughter. Her hair had come out of its ponytail on one side. She had egg on her sleeve from a dinner she'd started 44 minutes and one entire lifetime ago. Because that's not my job right now, he said. At 9:38, the main doors opened, and Kessler brought Victoria Hayes in. The room made a sound Ethan had heard exactly twice before in his life, both times overseas, both times in villages. It wasn't a scream. It was 300 people inhaling at once. Kessler walked her to the middle of the floor. He wasn't dragging her. That was the detail that kept snagging in Ethan's brain like a hook. He walked beside her with one hand at her elbow, courteous, almost gentle, and he stopped her at the center and turned her to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, that same easy voice. This is Victoria Hayes. Some of you work for her. Some of you invested with her. 2 of you tried very hard to buy her company last spring. He glanced at a man in the 3rd row who visibly flinched. In about 9 minutes, she's going to make a decision that determines what kind of night this becomes. I thought it was only fair you got to watch her make it. Don't do this, Victoria said. I'm giving you an audience. Most people would pay for that. You're making them hate me. I'm making them want something from you, Kessler said. There's a difference. Hate is loud. Want is patient. He turned back to the crowd and spread his hands. Ask her. Go ahead. Nobody's stopping you. Nobody said anything. Then a woman's voice from somewhere near the head table, thin and wrecked. What does he want? Ma'am. What does he want from you? A hard drive, Victoria said. Then give it to him. It's not that simple. My husband is having chest pains. The woman's voice cracked straight down the middle. It's that simple. And that was when Ethan understood exactly what Kessler was doing, and he felt something cold crawl up the back of his neck. Kessler didn't need to hurt anybody. He was going to let 300 terrified people do the work for him. He was going to stand there with his hands folded and let the room turn on Victoria Hayes until she cracked from the inside out, and it wouldn't cost him a single round. He's not a soldier, Ethan murmured. What? Walter said. I had him wrong. He's not running a raid. He's running an interrogation. The whole building is the interrogation. Son, you're gonna have to say that in English. He's not going to shoot anybody, Walter. Not yet. Because the second he does, we all know how it ends, and then we've got nothing to lose. And 300 people with nothing to lose is the only thing in this building that can kill him. Walter went quiet. So he keeps us hoping, Ethan said. He keeps us hoping right up until the last minute. And then, Ethan thought about 6 devices, 4 placed. He thought about a propped fire door. He thought about 7 men who hadn't bothered with masks. And then, he doesn't need us to hope anymore. At 9:44, a man in the second row stood up. He was maybe 50 silver at the temples, and he had the specific bearing of a person who had spent 30 years being the most important man in every room he entered. Now listen, he said. My name is Charles Whitmore. I sit on 4 boards. I can get you money, real money tonight, more than whoever's paying you. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. I'm offering you. Mr. Whitmore. Kessler didn't raise his voice at all. You have $410,000 in liquid assets and a second mortgage on the Winnetka house. I'm not insulted. I'm bored. Sit down. Whitmore sat down like his legs had been taken out from under him, and a low murmur went through the room, and Ethan heard it turn, because that was the moment 300 people realized these men had done homework. How does he know that? Someone whispered. He knows everything. He knew the manager's kid's birthday. Oh God, oh God. Quiet. Kessler again, still calm. Ms. Hayes, 7 minutes. At 9:47, Ethan started moving. Not far. He shifted 6 feet along the back wall on his knees, keeping low one arm out behind him so Lily could follow in his shadow until he was against the west service door. What are you doing? Walter hissed. Listening. To what? Ethan put his ear near the seam of the door and closed his eyes. Voices in the catering corridor. 2 of them. Won't hold. The dining room's got that glass wall on the north side. So when it goes, that whole face blows out into the street. That's collateral we don't need. Kess said mezzanine. Kess isn't the one who has to sell it to a fire marshal. Ethan's hands closed into fists so hard his knuckles cracked. Sell it to a fire marshal. They weren't just planting devices. They were placing them for a story. Somewhere the burn pattern would look right. Somewhere an investigator would stand 3 weeks later and say, yes, that's where it started. That's consistent with a gas line. That's consistent with an electrical fault. They were building an accident. Ethan. Walter had crawled up beside him, breathing hard. Your face just went somewhere. Come back. They're going to burn it. What? The building. They're going to burn the building with everyone inside and make it look like a fire. Ethan's voice came out perfectly level, which frightened Walter more than shouting would have. That's why no masks. That's why they're patient. That's why he keeps promising everybody they're going home. There's no getaway. There's no negotiation. There's a countdown. Walter Briggs sat back against the wall and put a hand over his mouth. How long? He said. He gave her 10 minutes. Reyes said 20 on the devices at 9:26. Ethan checked the clock over the head table. Call it 25 minutes from right now before they're set. Then they'll want everybody consolidated, which they already have. Then they go out the northeast stair. 25 minutes. Give or take. And then what? And then 310 people stop existing, and a billionaire has a very sad quote in the Tribune. Lily Cole tugged on her father's sleeve. Dad, what's a countdown? Ethan turned around and put both hands on her shoulders. Lily, I need you to do something for me, and it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever asked you. Okay. You don't even know what it is yet. You said it's hard. I said okay. And Ethan Cole, who had not cried in 11 years, felt his throat close so completely that he had to look at the floor for 3 full seconds before he could speak again. I need you to stay with Walter, he said. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, you stay with Walter and you do exactly what he says. Where are you going? I'm going to fix something. You're a maintenance guy. Yeah, Ethan said. I am. At 9:52, Kessler's radio crackled and everything accelerated. Kess, perimeter. Go. 2 units front, no lights. They're staging, not approaching. How'd they get called? Somebody's phone. Basement level, we missed a signal. Kessler was silent for a moment. Then mildly, find it. Copy. He turned back to Victoria and smiled, and it was the first time all night his smile hadn't reached his eyes. Well, he said, your 10 minutes just became 4. That's not, Ms. Hayes. He stepped in close. The drive. It's not here. I know it's not here. It's in a safe deposit box at 5th 3rd on Wacker Box 419, which opens at 8 tomorrow morning, and which is not going to be relevant to either of us. He held out his hand. The key half. You carry it. You've carried it every day for 8 months because you don't trust anyone, which is the only smart thing you've done all year. It's on you right now. Victoria's hand moved, just a fraction, toward her left wrist. Kessler saw it. Everyone in the front row saw it. There it is, he said softly. Wait. He took her wrist and turned it over, and there was a bracelet there. Thin, unremarkable. The kind of thing a woman wears without thinking. He worked the clasp with 2 fingers. Don't, Victoria said. Please, please listen to me. If you take that he doesn't need any of us, don't you understand that you included? You've seen his face. You've been in his house. Kessler stopped, just for a second, but he stopped, and Ethan Cole, 60 feet away on his knees against a service door, saw the whole thing happen and thought with perfect clarity, she just found the crack. You're a professional, Victoria said faster now, pressing. So run the numbers. Who's the last loose end after tonight? It's not me. I'll be in the fire. It's the 7 men who were in the building. Ms. Hayes, he's paid you what, 2 million split? How many ways he spent 40 on me, and I said no. She was breathing hard, her voice climbing. He doesn't pay people. He removes them. Ask yourself why he wanted no masks. Ask yourself who benefits if the men who did this are never identified because they were never seen. That's enough. Ask yourself where your extraction vehicle is parked and who's driving it. That's enough. The room went dead silent. Kessler had raised his voice. For the first time in 37 minutes, Damian Kessler had raised his voice, and everyone in that ballroom heard it, and Ethan felt the entire architecture of the night shift by half an inch. Walter, he breathed. She's good. She's gonna get herself killed. She's buying us minutes. She knows exactly what she's doing. Ethan was already turning toward the service door. And she just told me something he didn't want me to know. What? He's not sure. At 9:56, Ethan went through the west service door. He did it during the noise because there was noise now, because Charles Whitmore had started shouting again, and 2 other men had joined him, and the man at the main doors was walking toward the disturbance with his rifle coming up, and every eye in the building was pointed at the middle of the room. He went out low and fast, and he pulled the door shut behind him with his fingertips so it wouldn't clap. The catering corridor was empty. Ethan stood there in the dark for 1 second, with his back flat against the wall, and 11 years fell off him like a coat. He knew this corridor. He'd rewired the ballast in the 3rd fixture down. He knew that the corridor ran 90 feet east to the service elevator, that there was a linen room at the halfway point, that the linen room had a hatch in the ceiling into the return air plenum, because he had personally cut the access panel 18 months ago and gotten written up for doing it without a work order. He also knew that somewhere in the next 90 feet were 2 men who talked about fire marshals. He moved. 15 feet. Stop. Listen. 15 feet. At the linen room door, he heard a chair scrape and he went in sideways and closed himself in the dark with a rack of tablecloths and a smell of bleach that he would remember for the rest of his life. Footsteps. 2 men. Passing. Tell him the North Face is a problem. Tell him yourself. You tell him. He likes you. He doesn't like anybody. He just hasn't gotten around to me. They laughed. They kept walking. Ethan waited. 11 seconds after the sound died, then came out and went up the shelving like a ladder and pushed the access panel with the heel of his hand. The plenum ran the length of the floor. He'd been in it twice. Both times he'd sworn he'd never do it again. At 10:03, Victoria Hayes was pulled out of the ballroom and taken to the executive floor. She fought it. Not physically because she wasn't stupid, but with her voice all the way down the corridor. Where are we going? Somewhere quieter. Why quieter? Because you're clever in crowds, Kessler said, and I'd rather you weren't. They put her in the executive suite at the end of the hall, and Kessler shut the door, and it was the first time in 50 minutes that Victoria Hayes had been alone in a room with one man instead of surrounded by 300 people. She had been terrified of the crowd. She discovered instantly that she was more terrified without it. Sit. I'll stand. Sit down, Ms. Hayes. My knees hurt, and I'm not going to sit while you stand, and I'd rather not have this conversation on my feet. She sat. Kessler took the chair across from her, unslung the rifle, laid it across his lap, and pinched the bridge of his nose like a man at the end of a long shift. That was well done, he said. Downstairs, the part about the extraction vehicle. Was it true? Does it matter? It matters to you. Yes, Kessler said. It does. He looked up. I've been doing this a long time, and I've had a lot of people try to turn me. Most of them go for greed. You went for the arithmetic. That's rarer. You know I'm right. I know you might be right. Those aren't the same thing, and the difference is worth about $11 million, which is roughly what I lose if I walk out that door tonight without your bracelet. 11 million. For the team, I keep 4. Victoria laughed. It came out wrong, cracked and jagged. He's going to kill you. He's going to try, Kessler said. And there was no boast in it at all, just a flat professional observation, which was somehow worse. That's been priced in since the initial call. Everyone in this building is somebody's loose end. I've simply arranged to be a more expensive one to tie off than most. So take me with you. Kessler's eyebrows went up half an inch. Say that again. Take me with you. Not the bracelet. Me. Victoria leaned forward. You want leverage on Reginald Sloane. You've just spent an hour telling me you know exactly what kind of man he is. I'm the only person alive who can put him in a courtroom. That's not a hard drive. That's an insurance policy that walks. For 4 seconds, Damien Kessler said absolutely nothing. Then he said, Reginald Sloane. Yes. You said his name. I did. Out loud, to me. Yes. Kessler stood up. Ms. Hayes, he said, and for the first time all night, he actually sounded tired. I have been very careful all evening not to know that name. I have gone out of my way. There is a version of tonight where I hand you off collect and remain a man who is hired by a voice on a phone. He walked to the window. You've just closed that door. Victoria's stomach dropped. That's not I didn't. No. You did it on purpose. He glanced back. And it was the right play. It just wasn't the play you thought it was. What do you mean? I mean now I have to make a decision I was hoping to avoid, Kessler said, and you have about 6 minutes to convince me which way to go. 12 feet above them, lying flat on his stomach, in a return air plenum, with dust in his teeth, and a grill panel 3 inches from his face. Ethan Cole heard every word. At 10:09, he made the mistake. He shifted his weight to reach the grill, and his boot came down on a run of flex duct, and the whole thing gave a low, hollow, unmistakable thump. Below him, Kessler stopped talking. Ethan froze. He did not breathe. He did not blink. He put every ounce of 11 years of civilian life into the single act of not moving, and he listened to a man 40 feet of ductwork and 12 feet of ceiling away decide what he had just heard. What was that? Victoria said. Building. That didn't sound like a building. Building settle. That was above us. Ms. Hayes. Kessler's voice had changed. Be quiet for a moment. 10 seconds. 15. Ethan's shoulder was screaming. A grain of insulation had worked its way into his left eye, and he could feel the tear building, and he could not afford the movement it would take to blink it away. Then, on the radio, tinny and small, Kess West stairs clear, moving to 6. And Kessler said, copy, and the moment ended. Ethan let out a breath that took 4 full seconds to release. And then he heard the thing that made all of it worth it. Reyes, Kessler said. How many in the ballroom? 310 by the count. Any problems? One old guy with a bad knee keeps trying to talk to people, and there's a kid. A kid. Little girl. 8. A pause. Where's her father? Ethan's blood stopped moving. He was there, Reyes said slowly. He was against the west wall with the old man. Was. Stand by. 20 seconds. Ethan lay in the dark and listened to his own heartbeat and did math he did not want to do. Kess. Reyes's voice had lost all of its ease. The maintenance guy's gone. Gone. Not in the room. Find him. Kess, he's a janitor. He probably crawled into a... Reyes. Kessler's voice went absolutely flat. I want you to think back to the restaurant. I want you to think about how he came out from under that table. Did he come out with his hands up, or did he come out with his hands up and his body between you and the child? Silence on the radio. Say it. Body between. And which side did he keep the child on? Offside. Away from my weapon. And where were his eyes? On my hands. Reyes sounded like a man being slowly lowered into cold water. Not my face. My hands. Yeah, Kessler said. Ethan closed his eyes. Made. Find him, Kessler said. And Reyes. Go. Bring the girl to the mezzanine. Something detonated behind Ethan Cole's sternum. Kess. Bring her up, put her where he can see her, and get on the PA. He'll come out. Men like that always come out. A pause. That's the whole flaw in them. At 10:14, the PA came on in the Grand Meridian Ballroom, and 310 people heard Damien Kessler say in the most reasonable voice imaginable. Attention, I'm looking for a man in a gray work jacket, 40-ish. He has a daughter here. I'd like him to come to the mezzanine level in the next 4 minutes. A pause. If he does, nothing happens to anyone. If he doesn't, I'll ask the little girl to explain to all of you why her father decided to be clever instead. Walter Briggs had Lily by both shoulders. Don't move, he was saying. Sweetheart, look at me, don't you move. They said my dad. I know. They said my dad. Lily, listen to old Walter. Your father told you to stay with me, and I have known men like your father my whole life, and there is not one thing in this building that scares him except you getting up. Do you understand me? 2 rows over a woman was already pointing. There's the girl. That's the girl, she's right there. Ma'am, don't. He said nothing happens if he comes out, he said it. Ma'am. That's the girl? That's the girl. And Walter Briggs, 74 years old with a bad knee and a hearing aid. He refused to admit he needed, stood up in front of an 8-year-old and put his hands out and roared at 300 people in a voice that hadn't come out of him since 1974. The next person who points at this child goes through me. The room stopped. For 4 seconds, nobody moved. Then Reyes reached them, and Walter turned, and the old man looked up at the rifle and did not step aside. You'll have to shoot me, son. Sir. I said you'll have to shoot me. And you'd better do it right the first time, because I've been shot before, and I'm harder to kill than I look. Sir, I have a job. So did I. Walter's voice shook and held. For 22 years. And I never once put my hands on a child to make a man do what I wanted. Something crossed Reyes's face. For 1 second it looked like it might go the other way. Then his radio crackled with Kessler's voice, and his jaw tightened, and he lifted Lily Cole off the ground with one arm and carried her toward the doors, while she screamed for her father, and Walter Briggs went down on his bad knee trying to follow. At 10:66. Ethan Cole was 70 feet away in a ceiling plenum with dust in his throat, and he heard his daughter scream. He had heard a great many terrible sounds in his life. He had heard a helicopter come apart in the air. He had heard a 19-year-old ask for his mother. He had heard a doctor say the word metastatic and then keep talking as if there were anything left to say. He had never heard this. Something in him did not break exactly. It was cleaner than that. It was more like a door that had been welded shut for 11 years, simply came off its hinges and fell flat, and behind. It was a room he had built very carefully and never intended to enter again, and everything in it was still there, still oiled, still waiting. He put his palm flat against the grill. "Okay," he said, 12 feet below and 40 feet down the hall. The man who had walked away from a war put his weight on his hands and pushed. At 10:17, the access panel in the linen room ceiling came down and Ethan Cole came down with it. He landed on a rack of tablecloths rolled off it and was on his feet before the panel finished clattering against the shelving. He didn't wait to see if anyone had heard. He already knew someone had. The corridor door opened 4 seconds later, and a man came through it fast, with a rifle up and a light on the barrel sweeping left. And that was the mistake, because Ethan was on the right. He came in under the muzzle. There was no speech. Ethan had never understood why people in movies talked at a moment like this. He got his left hand on the weapon and drove it up and away, and put his shoulder into the man's chest and took him off his feet into the shelving, and the whole rack came down on both of them, and it was ugly and loud and over in 9 seconds. The man stopped moving. Ethan knelt there in a pile of linen, with his hands shaking so badly he had to press them flat against the floor. 11 years. 11 years of oil filters and light ballasts, and parent-teacher conferences, and his body had remembered all of it in under 10 seconds. And the worst part, the part he would think about later in the dark, was that it had felt like coming home. "Get up," he said to himself. "Get up, Cole." He got up. He took the radio off the man's shoulder, took the sidearm, took 2 magazines and left the rifle, because a rifle is a thing you carry when you intend to be seen. He put the earpiece in, and the Grand Meridian Hotel opened up inside his head like a page. At 10:19, the voices came through and they were arguing. "Say again, West Corridor." "Nothing on West. Linen kitchen dish pit all clear." "Where's Delgado?" "Delgado, check in." Silence. "Delgado, radio check." Ethan pressed his back to the wall and did not breathe. "Kess, Delgado's not answering." "How long?" 90 seconds. "Then you have a problem, don't you?" Kessler's voice, and it had gone somewhere new. Not loud, not angry. Careful. Ethan had heard that exact register before, in men who had just realized that the room they were standing in was no longer entirely theirs. "Everyone listen to me," Kessler said. "The janitor is not a janitor. Nobody moves alone. Nobody clears a room alone. If you cannot see another operator, you stop where you are and you say so out loud. Copy. 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 Brant. Nothing. Brant acknowledge. A pause and then a voice Ethan hadn't heard yet. Flat, slow, a little bored. Copy. Where are you? 6. 6 is not your assignment. It is now. And the radio went quiet, and Ethan Cole tilted his head slightly, because in the middle of everything else, something had just gone very wrong inside that crew, and it hadn't been him who did it. At 10:22, Kessler brought the PA up again, and this time, 310 people heard a different man talking. Gray jacket, 3 minutes. Ethan started moving toward the mezzanine stair. "I'm going to say something now that I want you to hear clearly, because I think you're listening on one of my radios, and I think you took it off a man named Delgado." Ethan stopped. "There it is," Kessler said. "You stopped walking. I know you did." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're good," Kessler continued. "You've been good all night. You made me look for you, and I've been looking for people for 22 years. So here's my offer, and it's the only one. Come up the north stair with your hands where I can see them, and I put your daughter back in that ballroom with the old man, and I don't touch either of them. That's it. That's the whole trade. A pause. Or you keep being clever, and in about 40 minutes, it stops mattering what either of us wanted. Ethan lifted the radio to his mouth. He looked at it for 2 full seconds. Then he keyed it. Kessler. Every man in that building heard a new voice come up on their own net, and somewhere on the mezzanine, Damien Kessler went very still. Well, Kessler said. Hello. Put my daughter in the ballroom. After you come up. Now. That's not how a negotiation works. It's not a negotiation, Ethan said. You've got 6 devices 4 placed, and a north face problem your own man doesn't like. You've got 2 police units staging out front with no lights, which means they're waiting on a tactical team, which means you have maybe 35 minutes before somebody with a bullhorn takes over your evening. And you've got a man named Brandt, who just told you no on an open channel. Silence. So no, Ethan said. This isn't a negotiation. This is me telling you the score because I don't think you have it. Who is this? Kessler said. Maintenance. At 10:25, Victoria Hayes heard the whole exchange through the door of the executive suite, and she started laughing. It came out of her before she could stop it, high and cracked and entirely inappropriate, and the man guarding her turned around and stared. Something funny. Yes, Victoria said. Yes, actually. What? He doesn't know either. She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. Your boss has been standing in that room all night acting like God, and he just found out he doesn't know who's in the building with him. Shut up. You should be scared. I said shut up. Not of him. Victoria stood. Of Brandt. The guard's face changed, and Victoria Hayes, who had spent 6 years reading men across conference tables for exactly this kind of flicker, felt her stomach drop straight through the floor, because she had guessed, and she had guessed right. You know, she said quietly. You already know. Sit down. He's not one of yours, is he? Sit down. He came with the contract. He was assigned. Kessler didn't pick him. She was talking fast now, pressing the same way she'd pressed a hostile board through a proxy fight in 2023. Sloan put a man inside your own crew, and every one of you noticed, and not one of you said it out loud, because the second you say it out loud, you have to do something about it. The guard's hands were white on the rifle. You're going to die tonight, Victoria said, and it isn't going to be the police that do it. At 10:28, Ethan reached the service door at the base of the mezzanine stair, and he stopped because there was a decision waiting for him there, and he'd been carrying it up 4 flights. He keyed the radio. Kessler. Still here. You've got a man on the mezzanine with my daughter. I do. Reyes. Yes. Put him on. A pause. Then, go ahead. Reyes. Yeah. You said you've got a boy. 6. Ethan heard the man's breathing change. Don't do that, Reyes said. I'm not doing anything. I'm asking you a question. Is he 6? He's 6. Where is he tonight? With his mother. Does she know what you do? Don't. Reyes. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the door. I'm not trying to turn you. I don't have time, and you're not the type. I'm telling you one thing, and then I'll stop. There are 6 devices in this building, and there are 7 of you, and there is 1 vehicle. Count the seats. Silence on the channel. Long silence. Then Kessler's voice came back, and it was clipped for the first time all night. That's enough of that. Count the seats, Reyes, Ethan said, and let go of the key. At 10:31, everything went sideways at once. The lights in the east wing died. Not all of them, and not the emergency lighting, but every fixture on the mezzanine and the 6th floor dropped at the same instant, and 11 radios came alive on top of each other. Power. Was that us? Kess, that wasn't us. Nobody move, nobody shoot. Sound off by number. 2, 3, 4. I'm dark up here, I got nothing. 5, 6. Ethan lowered his hand from the panel inside the service door and thought calmly, 5, 6, and Reyes makes 7. And Brandt didn't sound off. Neither did Kessler. 7, Reyes said. Brandt. Nothing. Brandt. And then Brant's voice from somewhere that echoed unhurried, almost pleasant. You've got a lot of people talking on this net, Kess. Where are you? Working. On what? On the thing I was hired for, Brant said, and he clicked off. At 10:34. Ethan came up the last flight and onto the mezzanine in the dark, and he found his daughter. She was sitting on the carpet with her back against the balcony rail and her knees pulled up, and Reyes was standing 4 feet away, with his rifle pointed at the floor. And when Ethan stepped out of the stairwell, the man's weapon came halfway up and then stopped. Nobody moved. Dad. Hey, Bug. Dad. I know. Stay right there. Reyes hadn't finished raising the rifle. That was the whole story of the next 10 seconds, and both men knew it. You're fast, Reyes said. Not that fast. Fast enough that I'd lose. Probably. You want to find out? No, Ethan said. I want to go home and burn a pan of pancakes. Reyes laughed. It was a terrible sound, exhausted and cracked open. Man, he said. Man, what are we doing? You know what we're doing. I got told this was a retrieval. 40 minutes in and out, corporate lady with a hard drive. He shook his head. There wasn't supposed to be a kid. There wasn't supposed to be a building. How many devices? 6. What kind? Incendiary. Thermite core gas accelerant. The whole thing reads as a line failure after. Reyes swallowed. Kess said it was theater. Said we'd never set them. Said the client wanted the option. Do you believe that? Reyes didn't answer. Count the seats, Ethan said again quietly. I counted them an hour ago, Reyes said. It's a 9-passenger van, and there's 7 of us, and Brant's got the keys. And then he lowered his rifle all the way and stepped back from the little girl on the floor. Take her, he said. Reyes. Take her, man, take her before I think about it. At 10:37. Ethan Cole picked up his daughter and Lily. Cole put her arms around her father's neck so hard she nearly took him off balance, and for 4 full seconds he stood on a dark mezzanine in a building full of armed men with his eyes closed and his face in her hair. You came, she said. I always come. You were gone. I know. You said you were fixing something. I'm still fixing it. Is it fixed? Not yet, Ethan said. Not even a little. Behind them. Reyes keyed his radio and said in a voice that gave away nothing at all. Mezzanine's clear. No contact. Kessler's answer came back after a 2-second delay. Copy. 2 seconds. Ethan heard those 2 seconds and understood that Kessler had not believed a word of it. At 10:39, Ethan got Lily to the north stair and put her in Walter Briggs's arms. The old man had gotten himself out of the ballroom during the blackout on a bad knee, 60 feet down a corridor, which Ethan would think about for the rest of his life. You crazy old man! Don't start with me. I told you to stay put. Yeah, well, I've been ignoring better men than you since Nixon. Walter had Lily against his chest, both arms locked. Where are we going? Fire stair northeast corner. It's propped. That's their exit. You want me to walk her into their exit? I want you to walk her past it. Down to the 2nd floor landing, then west across the mezzanine, then down the laundry chute access to the loading dock. Ethan grabbed the old man's collar and made him look. There's a roll door at the dock, and it's manual. You lift it. You get out into the alley, and you go left toward Wabash, and you do not stop Walter, not for anything, not if you hear me on that radio, not if you hear the building come apart. Son. Say it back. North stair, 2nd floor, west chute access dock, left toward Wabash. Good. Ethan. Don't. There's 300 people in that ballroom. I know how many there are. You can't. Walter. Ethan's voice broke for exactly 1 syllable, and then came back level. Go. Lily Cole reached out over the old man's shoulder as he turned, and her fingers caught the sleeve of her father's jacket. And Ethan Cole had to physically peel his daughter's hand off his arm, and it was the hardest thing he had ever done. Harder than San Diego, harder than the funeral, harder than any single moment of his life, before or since. Dad, come with us. Burned edges, he said. Dad, I promised you burned edges. And he let go, and he turned around, and he went back toward the fire. At 10:43, Ethan found Victoria because the guard outside the executive suite made the same mistake Delgado had made, which was standing in a doorway. It took 11 seconds. Ethan came out of it with a scraped forearm, a second radio, and a keycard. And when he pushed the door open, Victoria Hayes was standing behind an overturned chair holding a broken lampstand like a bat. They looked at each other. Maintenance, she said. Yeah. You're the one on the radio. Yeah. You're an idiot. That's been established. She lowered the lampstand. Her hands were shaking. She noticed him notice, and she gripped it harder to stop it, and Ethan looked away to give her the dignity of it. Where's your daughter? She said. Out. 10 minutes. And you came back. There's 308 people upstairs. 9, Victoria said. Someone had a heart attack at 10:15. He's alive. His wife is doing compressions, and nobody has stopped her. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Okay, he said. Then here's where we are. 6 incendiary devices. 4 placed as of an hour ago, probably all 6 now. They're staged to read as an electrical fire. There's 1 exit vehicle, 7 men, and a man named Brandt, who doesn't take Kessler's orders. I know about Brandt. How? Because I made a very stupid mistake, Victoria said. And it turned out to be the smartest thing I've done all night. I said Sloane's name out loud to Kessler. Why is that smart? Because Kessler didn't want to know it. She stepped closer. He's been running this whole thing at arm's length on purpose. Voice on a phone, no names, no faces on his end. That's how he stays alive after a job. And I took that away from him. So now he's a loose end too. Now he knows he's a loose end, Victoria said. Which is different. And Brandt knows he knows. Ethan stared at her. You did that on purpose. I did it on instinct, and I've been telling myself it was on purpose for the last 40 minutes. And Ethan Cole, for the first time since a chandelier came down at 9:15, almost smiled. Ms. Hayes. Victoria. Victoria, how well do you read a building schematic? Terribly. How well do you read people? Better than anyone in this hotel. Good, Ethan said. Because I can't get 300 people down one stairwell, and I can't fight 7 men, and I don't have time for either. So we're going to do the only thing that's left. Which is we're going to make them evacuate the building for us. At 10:47, Victoria Hayes sat down at the security console in the back office of the executive floor and put her hands on a keyboard, and Ethan Cole stood behind her with a radio in each hand. It's locked, she said. It's a Kensington panel. Try 0000. Are you serious? It's a hotel. She typed it. The screen woke up. Oh my God, Victoria said. Don't celebrate. Look for fire alarm control. I have cameras. I have 31 cameras. Then find me Brandt. And 40 seconds later, Victoria Hayes said in a voice that had gone completely flat, Ethan. What? Camera 19, sub-basement. He leaned over her shoulder. That's the main gas riser, Ethan said. What's he doing to it? He's not placing a device. Then what? He's opening it. Ethan's hand closed on the back of her chair hard enough to crack the plastic. He's cracking the riser and venting the sub-basement. That's not an accelerant, Victoria. That's a reason. 6 incendiaries in a building full of gas doesn't read like arson. It reads like a line failure with secondary ignition. It reads like the exact thing they've been building all night, and it means the timeline isn't 40 minutes. How long? That space fills in 15, maybe 12. He was already moving. Kessler doesn't know. What? Kessler doesn't know. Ethan turned around. Look at his face on camera 22. He's still working the room. He's still running his clock. Brandt moved the timeline and didn't tell him, because the whole point is that nobody walks out of here who can say the name Reginald Sloane, and that includes the men who were hired to say it. Victoria's mouth had gone dry. They're going to burn their own team. They're going to burn everybody, Ethan said. And in about 11 minutes, it won't matter who's on which side. At 10:51, Ethan Cole keyed the crew radio and did the thing that ended any chance he had of surviving quietly. Kessler. Busy. Camera 19. A pause. Say again. Your security office has 31 cameras, and I'm sitting in it. Camera 19. Sub-basement gas riser northeast corner. Pull it up on your phone or send a man, I don't care which, but do it in the next 60 seconds. Why? Because your friend Brant is venting the building, Ethan said, and he didn't put it on your schedule. The channel went silent. 5 seconds. 10. Then very quietly Kessler said, Reyes. Go. Sub-basement. Eyes only. Do not engage. Copy. Ethan waited. Victoria waited. Neither of them said anything, and the only sound in that office was the hum of a 31-channel monitor, and the woman in the ballroom, 2 floors above them, still doing chest compressions. At 10:54, Reyes came back on. Kess. Go. Risers open. His voice had lost every trace of the professional. Risers open, the meters spinning, and there's a secondary on the stair door. He rigged the door, Kess. He rigged our own stair door. Nobody spoke. Then Charlie or Five or whoever the man on the 6th floor was said in a small voice. What does that mean? It means the northeast fire stair is not an exit, Kessler said. Kess, it means we were never leaving through it. Kess, the van. The van is a prop, Kessler said. The van has been a prop since the first phone call. We were paid $11 million to walk into a building we were never intended to walk out of. And I have been standing in a ballroom for 90 minutes, explaining to 300 civilians how patient I am. The radio hissed. Boss, someone said. What do we do? And Damien Kessler, who had run 111 operations on 4 continents and had never once broken a promise, said the only thing left. Gray jacket. Here, Ethan said. You have the security office. Yes. Can you pull the alarm? I can pull every alarm in the building. Then why haven't you? Because 300 people funneling into one clear stairwell with 7 armed men in the building gets a lot of them killed, Ethan said. And because the second that alarm goes, the door magnets release and the lobby unlocks, and your men are standing between civilians and the street, with rifles and the tactical element out front, takes that as a hostage execution in progress and comes through the glass shooting. That's why. Yes, Kessler said slowly. That's right. So here's what happens. You're giving me instructions. I'm giving you a way out of a building you're going to die in 8 minutes, Ethan said. You want to argue about tone? Silence. Talk, Kessler said. At 10:56, Ethan Cole stood in a security office beside a woman he'd met 13 minutes earlier and gave orders to 7 armed men over a stolen radio. Weapons in the ice machine on the 4th floor, all of them. Every rifle, every sidearm, every magazine right now, and you leave the door open so I can see it on camera 28. That's a hard sell to my people. Then sell it because a tactical team is going to come through that lobby in 6 minutes, and every man they see holding a rifle is going to end the night on a coroner's table, including you, including Reyes, including whoever's got a kid at home. And then you take off your jackets and you walk your men into the ballroom and you sit down on the floor with everybody else. You want me to hide among the hostages. I want you to be useful, Ethan said. There are 309 people up there, and 11 of them can't walk on their own, and 1 of them is coding on a ballroom floor, and I need bodies who know how to move people fast under stress. That's you. That's your entire skill set. Congratulations, you're a fireman. And afterward, you're under arrest, and I'll testify to every single thing you did tonight, the good and the bad, and Victoria Hayes will do the same, and you can take your chances with a jury like everybody else. Kessler laughed. It sounded like something tearing. You know I could still walk out the front door and leave all of you. You could. Why don't I think I'm going to? Because you told 300 people you've never broken a promise, Ethan said, and I don't think that was a line. The channel went quiet for 4 seconds. Then, Reyes. Go. Ice machine, 4th floor, all of it. Copy. Everybody else, you heard him. Jackets off. Ballroom, move. At 10:59, Victoria Hayes turned around in the chair and looked up at Ethan Cole. That was insane. Probably. They're going to double-cross you. Some of them, maybe. Then why? Because I can't carry a man with a heart attack down 4 flights by myself, Ethan said, and neither can you. He crouched down beside the console and pulled the fire panel cover off the wall. Victoria. Yeah. When I pull this, everything happens at once. Alarm, strobes, door magnets, elevator recall. And there's a gas-filled sub-basement under this building with a live thermite core sitting in it. She understood. He watched her understand. The alarm system, she said. It's electric. Every relay in it throws a spark. So pulling it could ignite the sub-basement, yes. Then don't pull it. In 4 minutes, the sub-basement ignites on its own, Ethan said, and nobody's moving and the doors are still locked. Victoria Hayes put both hands over her mouth. Oh, God. Yeah. How sure are you? About what? About the 4 minutes. Not very. She laughed wetly, horribly. That's a terrible answer. It's the true one. And then Ethan Cole did something Victoria Hayes would describe under oath 11 weeks later and still not be able to explain properly. Which was that he stopped, and he turned, and he asked her, You want to make the call? Me. You've been making calls all night against a man with a private army, and you haven't been wrong yet. He held out the pull handle. 309 people. Your evidence, your fight, your building. I'm just the guy who knows where the ducks are. Victoria stared at him. Why are you really asking me? Because if I'm wrong, Ethan said, I'd rather 2 people carried it than 1. And Victoria Hayes, 34 years old, orphaned at 11, who had never once in her life been given a choice that mattered by anyone who wasn't trying to take something from her, reached out and put her hand over his on the handle. Together, she said. At 11:02 on the 6th floor, Reyes dumped the last rifle into an ice machine and closed the door. At 11:02 in the ballroom. Damien Kessler walked in with his jacket off and his hands empty and said, Everyone stand up, you're leaving. And 300 people looked at him and did not move. And a 74-year-old man with a bad knee stood up first because Walter Briggs had come back. At 11:02, in a sub-basement filling with gas, a device the size of a coffee can sat under a stairwell door and waited. And at 11:03, Ethan Cole and Victoria Hayes pulled the handle together. At 11:03 and 4 seconds. Nothing happened. That was the worst part. Not the noise. The 4 seconds of nothing where Ethan Cole stood with his hand under Victoria Hayes's hand on a fire pole and waited to find out whether he had just killed 300 people. Then the strobes came on. Then the horns. Then 4 floors down and 100 feet away, every magnetic lock in the Grand Meridian Hotel released at once with a sound like a held breath, finally letting go. And the building did not burn. Victoria's knees went. She caught the edge of the console, and Ethan caught her elbow, and neither of them said anything for a second and a half. We're alive, she said. For now. Say something nicer than that. We're alive and the doors are open. Better. He was already at the monitors. Camera 12, lobby, look. They're open. Ethan, the front doors are open. Camera 22, ballroom. And on a 9-inch black and white monitor in a back office. 309 people came up off a ballroom floor all at once, and standing in the doorway, holding both doors wide with his shoulders, was a man in a white dress shirt with no jacket and no weapon, and a voice that carried over a fire alarm. North Stair, Kessler was shouting. Not the elevators. The elevators are recalled North Stair single file. Keep your hand on the shoulder in front of you. He's actually doing it, Victoria said. He's doing it because he's got 8 minutes of air left, same as us. You don't believe that. I believe both things, Ethan said. That's usually how people work. At 11:05, Ethan keyed the radio. Kessler. Little busy. Northeast stair is rigged. Nobody goes near it. I have a man on it turning people back. Who? Reyes. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. Tell him thank you. Tell him yourself. He's got about 4 minutes of goodwill left in him, and then he's going to remember he's facing 40 years. A grunt movement, a woman's voice crying somewhere behind him. Gray jacket. Go. There's a man on this floor who is not breathing well. Third row from the head table. His wife's been doing compressions since 10:15. You knew that. I've known that for 20 minutes. And you didn't come. I couldn't carry him and open the doors at the same time, Ethan said. So I opened the doors. Get 4 men under him and go down the north stair sideways and do not stop on a landing for any reason. If you stop, you'll never start again. Copy, Kessler said, and it came out of him automatically, and Ethan heard the exact moment the man realized he'd just said copy to a janitor. At 11:06, Victoria Hayes said, Ethan, in a voice that made him turn around fast. What? Camera 19. He came over her shoulder. He's gone, she said. Brant's gone. He was there 90 seconds ago, and now the sub-basement's empty. Where's the stair door? Still closed. Still. She leaned in. There's something on it. That's the thing Reyes saw. Then he didn't go out that way. Then where? Ethan's eyes moved across the monitor wall, fast the way they'd moved across a lobby ceiling an hour and 50 minutes earlier. There, he said. Camera 6. Freight elevator. That's not moving. No. But the doors are open on sub-level, and they were closed at 10:54, and a freight car with the doors open on the bottom floor means somebody's standing in the shaft. Why would he stand in a shaft? Because a shaft goes up. Ethan straightened. He's not leaving. He's climbing. Climbing to what? To wherever the last device is. Victoria's face did something complicated. You said 6. Reyes said 6. Then where are they? 4 in the lower floors, 1 on the mezzanine. Ethan's jaw worked. Kessler moved the 6th to the mezzanine at 9:52. I heard him say it. And Brant's climbing past the mezzanine. Victoria stood up so fast the chair rolled into the wall. The ballroom, she said. He's going to the ballroom. At 11:08, Ethan Cole ran. I went out of the security office and down the executive corridor and hit the north stair door with his shoulder without slowing. And the stairwell was full of people coming down, hundreds of them. Gala dresses and bare feet, and a man carrying a woman's shoes for her because she'd lost them somewhere on 4. And Ethan Cole did the single most difficult physical act of his entire night, which was to go up through them. Sir, you're going the wrong way. Sir, it's this way. Coming through. Coming through, hold the rail, coming through. He passed a boy of 9 or 10, being carried by a stranger. He passed a woman on her knees on a landing, hyperventilating, and a bartender in a vest crouched in front of her, saying 4 in 4 out, 4 in 4 out, like a prayer. He passed 4 men in white dress shirts carrying a 5th man flat between them, with a woman walking backward in front of them screaming at her husband to stay, stay, stay with me, Michael, stay. One of the 4 looked up as Ethan went by. It was Kessler. Neither of them said anything at all. At 11:10, Ethan came out on the mezzanine level, and Reyes was there, and Reyes had his hands out flat and empty. Where? Ballroom north end, Reyes said. He came up the freight shaft. I saw the doors move. How many left inside? 20-30, the slow ones. There's a woman who won't leave her mother, and her mother won't leave a wheelchair, and the chair won't fit the stair turn. Then take the chair apart. What? 4 bolts on the seat frame, take the wheels off, carry her in the seat. 2 men at the shoulders, 1 under the knees. Go. Reyes went. He got 3 steps and turned around. Cole. What? That's my name too, you know. Reyes is my last name. My first name's Marco. He swallowed. In case somebody asks tomorrow. In case there's a tomorrow and somebody's writing it down. Marco Reyes, Ethan said. Go get the wheelchair. At 11:12. Ethan Cole walked into the Grand Meridian Ballroom for the second time that night, and Brant was standing at the head table. He was a smaller man than Ethan expected. That was the first thing. Not big, not obviously dangerous, no swagger in him at all. He was crouched by a service panel in the wall behind the head table with a canvas bag open beside him, and he did not stop what he was doing when Ethan came in. You'd be the janitor, he said. You'd be Brandt. That's not my name. Didn't figure it was. 20-odd people were still in the room at the far end, clustered around a wheelchair and moving toward the north doors in the herky-jerky rhythm of the very frightened. Ethan put himself between them and the head table without appearing to do anything at all. You're not going to make it, Brandt said. Just so you know, in case you were doing math. I'm always doing math. Then you already know the sub-basement's saturated. I know you cracked the riser at 1049, and I know that space is 110 by 60 with an 8-foot ceiling, and I know you're standing in a building you say is about to go up, and you don't look like a man in a hurry. Ethan took one step. So either you're lying, or you've got a way out you haven't told anyone about. Brandt smiled at the wall. You're all right, he said. You're actually all right. Where'd they train you? Kansas. Brandt laughed. Sure. How much is he paying you? Who? Sloan. And Brandt's hands stopped, just for a second. But they stopped, and Ethan Cole, who had spent an entire night reading pauses, took one more step during it. Don't, Brandt said without turning. You know what I can't figure out, Ethan said. You had 7 men and a building. You could have done this at 10 o'clock. You had 2 hours where nobody would have stopped you, and you sat on it. Wasn't the plan. The plan was the fire. The plan, Brandt said, was a story. Fires don't sell. Fires get investigated. What sells is a fire with a reason. He finally turned his head. 7 armed men break into a hotel to rob a gala. It goes wrong. Somebody hits a gas line. Tragic. 90 seconds on the national feed, 1 senator's thoughts and prayers, and 1 very inconvenient woman burns to death in a crime that had nothing to do with anybody's finances. And your 7 men. 6, Brandt said. You've been busy. 6 men who could name him. 6 men who were hired for exactly that reason. Brandt stood up. Kessler thinks he negotiated a fee. Kessler was cast. Every man in this building tonight has a file that reads like a man who'd do this. That's not luck, janitor. That's a casting call. Ethan felt something turn over in his stomach. You picked them. I recommended them. You picked 7 men to die in a building so a story would hold up. I picked 7 men who've all done worse than this for less, Brandt said. Don't hand me a candle for them. At 11:14, the last of the 20 made it out the north doors, and the ballroom was empty except for 2 men. That's it, Brandt said. That's your crowd. You did good. Genuinely. 200 people are going to name their next kid after you. 309. Sure. Say it right. 309, Brandt said. Fine. Now walk out. Can't. Why not? Because you're not done, Ethan said. You're still working, and men in your line don't work for free after the job's blown. Which means the fire isn't the job anymore. Brandt was quiet. It's her, Ethan said. It's still her. Everything else was dressing. If the building doesn't burn, you still need Victoria Hayes to not walk out that door, and you can't do it in front of 200 cops on the street, and you cannot do it in a stairwell full of witnesses. You've got a real gift, Brandt said. You know that. Where is she supposed to be? She's supposed to be in the security office, Brandt said, which is where I left a man 4 minutes ago. At 11:15, Ethan Cole moved. He crossed 20 feet of ballroom floor faster than Brandt expected him to, and Brandt was fast too, and what happened between them lasted 11 seconds, and was not a fight in any way that a person who has never been in one would recognize. It was 2 men trying to get a grip on each other's wrists, and failing and trying again. It ended with Ethan on one knee, and blood in his mouth, and Brandt 3 steps back with his hand at his hip, and a small ugly pistol coming up, and a voice from the north doors said, "Don't." Kessler was in the doorway. His white shirt was black to the elbows. There was a man's blood on both his forearms, and he was breathing like a bellows, and he had in his right hand a fire extinguisher. "Kess," Brandt said, "you look like hell." "Michael made it to the ambulance." "Who's Michael?" "The man from the 3rd row," Kessler said. "His name is Michael. He has 2 grandchildren, and his wife's name is Ruth." "Why in God's name are you telling me that?" "Because I've been standing in that stairwell for 6 minutes learning names," Kessler said, And I've realized I don't know a single one of yours. At 11:16, Brandt put the pistol on Kessler instead of Ethan, and Ethan Cole understood that a man had just traded his own life for 2 seconds. He took them. He came up off his knee and drove into Brandt's hip, and the shot went into the ceiling, and then the two of them were on the floor, and the extinguisher came down, and there was one very short, very final sound. Ethan rolled off, sat up, spat blood on a $100,000 carpet. "He's not dead," Kessler said. "I know." "Would you like him to be?" "No." "Why not?" "Because dead men don't testify," Ethan said, and then quieter, "and because my daughter's going to ask me what I did tonight." Kessler looked at him for a long moment. Then he set the extinguisher down very carefully, the way a man sets down something he no longer trusts himself to hold. "Your daughter," he said. "Yeah. I put a rifle near her." "You did. I want you to know that when I did it, I did not intend—" He stopped, started again. "That's not true. I did intend. That's the whole trouble. I intended it exactly." Kessler. "Yes. Save it for the judge. I've got a woman 2 floors down and a man on the way to her." At 11:17, Victoria Hayes heard the security office door open behind her and did not turn around because she was watching camera 19. Ethan, the freight car moved again. "Ms. Hayes." It was not Ethan. Victoria turned around very slowly. The man in the doorway was one of the 6. She'd seen him in the lobby at 9:15 at the elevator bank, indexing his support hand along the rail. He had no jacket on now, the way Kessler had told them all, and he had a fire extinguisher in one hand, like a good citizen, and he had a knife in the other. "You were told to evacuate," she said. "I was." "Then why are you here?" "Because there's a bonus," he said, "and it's mine now, and there's nobody left to split it with." Victoria Hayes did not scream. She would think about that a lot later in the weeks when she couldn't sleep. She did not scream, and she did not run for the door he was standing in. What she did was reach behind her without looking, put her hand on the security console, and press a key. The PA came on. Every speaker in the Grand Meridian Hotel, every floor, every corridor, and out through the propped lobby doors into a street with 40 first responders on it, carried the sound of Victoria Hayes saying in a perfectly level voice, "Security office, 4th floor, northeast corner. He's got a knife and his name is—" She looked at him, and her voice did not shake. "What is your name?" He came across the room. He got 2 steps, and Marco Reyes hit him from the side like a truck. At 11:18. Ethan came through the door at a dead sprint and stopped because it was already over. Reyes was on top of a man he'd eaten breakfast with that morning, both hands locked on a wrist, and Victoria Hayes was standing against the wall with a monitor bracket in her fist that she'd torn off with her bare hands and did not remember tearing off. "Get him off me," the man was screaming. Reyes, shut up. You're going down with all of us." "I know," Reyes said. "Shut up." Ethan crossed the room in 3 steps and helped him. At 11:20 in a hotel, emptied of everyone except 4 people who should not have been there. Victoria Hayes sat down on the floor of a security office and put her head between her knees and breathed. "You okay?" "No." "Fair." "I said, 'What is your name?' to a man with a knife," she said into her lap. "Why did I do that?" "Because you wanted it recorded," Ethan said. "Same reason you said Sloane's name to Kessler." She looked up. "You still think that was a strategy?" "I think you're a person who's been building a case for 6 years," Ethan said, "and you can't turn it off, and tonight that's the only reason any of us are standing here." At 11:22, they found Brandt's phone. Reyes found it actually going through the man's bag in the ballroom under Ethan's eye, and he held it up and said, "Cole," in a voice that had gone strange. "What?" "It's ringing." Nobody moved. "It's been ringing," Reyes said. "There's 9 missed, all the same number, no name." Victoria Hayes crossed the ballroom and took the phone out of his hand. "Don't," Ethan said. "Why not?" "Because whatever you're about to do, you don't get to take it back." "I know," she said, and answered it and put it on speaker. For 3 full seconds, nobody on either end said anything. Then a voice came out of that phone, And it was an old man's voice, and it was calm, and it was mildly annoyed, the way a man is annoyed when a table isn't ready. "You're very late." Victoria Hayes closed her eyes. "Say something," the voice said. "I've been sitting here watching a very boring news channel tell me nothing has happened. Is it done, or is it not done?" And Victoria said, "Hello, Reggie." The silence on the other end went on for a long, long time. "Victoria, it's not done." "I don't know what you think." "Reginald Sloane," she said. "It's 11:23 on a Friday night, and you're calling a man named Brandt, who is currently unconscious on a ballroom floor at the Grand Meridian. And this call is being recorded on the hotel's system on the phone in my hand, and by 3 people standing next to me, one of whom is the man you hired." "Nothing." "I want you to say something," she said. "I'd like it very much." "You always were dramatic. Say his name." "Who's Michael Petrov's son turns 4 in November," she said. "That's not the one. Say Brandt's." "I've never heard of anyone by that name." "Then hang up." He didn't hang up. That was the thing that would run on every news channel in the country for 11 days. Not the raid, not the ballroom, not the SWAT stack in the lobby. 9 seconds of dead air on a recorded line, and an old man who could not make himself hang up the phone. "Victoria," Sloane said finally, and the voice had changed. "Whatever they told you in there, you understand that there is no version of the next 6 months where you enjoy this." "Probably not." "I've buried better people than you." "I know," Victoria said. 22 of them. I have the names. I have the transfers. I have the shell in Nevis. And now I have you on a phone at 11:23 asking a contractor whether it's done." "Victoria, 61 people were in that ballroom who worked for you," she said. "Your own investors, Reggie. You were going to burn your own investors to get to me, and it never once slowed you down, did it?" And Reginald Sloane said, "It was the cost." And Ethan Cole heard 3 words end a man's entire life. The line went dead. At 11:25, nobody in that ballroom spoke. Then Reyes said very quietly, "Ma'am, play it back." "What?" "Play it back, right now. Because if that phone drops that file or the battery dies or somebody grabs it in the next 10 minutes, none of that happened, and I need it to have happened." Victoria Hayes looked at a man in a black tactical shirt who had held her at gunpoint 2 hours earlier and said, "That's the smartest thing anyone has said to me all night." She played it back. Then she emailed it to 4 addresses, and one of them was a federal inbox, and one of them was a woman named Diane Okafor at the Chicago Tribune who had been waiting 8 months for a phone call, and one of them was herself, and one of them was a journalist in Boston who held the other half of a key. "Send," she said out loud, and pressed it. At 11:28, the tactical team came through the north stairwell, and Ethan Cole went down on his face on a ballroom carpet with his hands laced behind his head, and did not resist in any way whatsoever. "Hands, hands. Down there, down. He's not one of them. Get down." "I'm down," Ethan said into the carpet. "I'm down. I'm not armed. There's a weapon under the head table that isn't mine. There's an unconscious male at the north wall. There's a live gas condition in the sub-basement risers open. Northeast fire stair is rigged. Do not open the northeast fire stair." The knee in his back did not come off, but a voice above him said, "Say that again about the stair. Northeast fire stair, ground level. There's a device on the door. Your building's saturated below grade, and your street valve is on the Wabash side." A pause. "Who the hell are you?" "Maintenance," Ethan said. At 11:41, a fire captain named Ruiz shut the gas at the street, and by midnight, the Grand Meridian Hotel had not burned down, which is the sort of thing that never makes a headline, because it is the absence of one. At 11:47, Damien Kessler was walked out of the lobby in flex cuffs, past 200 people who had been in his ballroom, and someone in the crowd started shouting at him, and someone else, a woman named Ruth, whose husband had been carried down 4 flights of stairs sideways, said, "Leave him alone." And nobody could make sense of that for weeks. At 11:52, an FBI agent named Torres sat down on the back step of an ambulance across from Ethan Cole and said, "Mr. Cole, I have to tell you honestly, I've read the preliminary, and I don't believe most of it." "That's fair." You went back in. Yes. After you got your daughter out. And Ethan Cole, who had been holding it together since 9:15, felt the entire night arrive at once. Where is she? He said. Sir. Where is my daughter? Sir, I don't. An 8-year-old girl mismatched socks. She came out the loading dock on Wabash with a 74-year-old man with a bad knee, and the man came back inside Agent Torres. He came back inside without her, and I have been carrying that for 51 minutes, and I need you to find out where she is right now. Torres was already on her radio. Ethan Cole stood in the middle of a street full of lights and did not hear anything anyone said to him for the next 90 seconds. Then from somewhere, past the fire line, past a barricade, past a uniformed officer who was trying and failing to hold on to her dad. He turned. She hit him at a dead run, and he caught her under the arms and lifted her, and she wrapped herself around his neck so hard that he made a sound he did not recognize as his own. You came out, she said. You came out, you came out, you came out. I came out. Walter said you would. Where is he? He's right there. He's right there, Dad. He made a police lady hold my hand, and then he went back in, and I said you can't, and he said, what did he say? He said your daddy's got 300 people and no hands, Lily Cole said, and then he went. And Ethan Cole stood in the middle of Michigan Avenue with his daughter's face in his neck and looked over the top of her head at an old man sitting on a curb 60 feet away with a blanket around his shoulders and a bad knee stretched out in front of him, who raised one hand about 4 inches off his leg and nodded once. At 12:14, a reporter got close enough to shout, Sir, sir, is it true you're a former Navy SEAL? Ethan Cole did not turn around. Sir, 300 people. Dad. Yeah, Bug. He's talking to you. I know. Are you going to answer? No, Ethan said. Why not? And her father carrying her toward a parking garage on Wabash, where an 11-year-old Ford with a bad alternator was waiting, said, because it's almost 1 in the morning, and I owe somebody pancakes. At 1:38 in the morning, in a third-floor walk-up in Rogers Park, with a stove that worked. Sometimes Ethan Cole made pancakes. He burned the first 2, not on purpose. Those are wrong, Lily said. Those are perfect. They're black. They're seasoned. Dad, eat your pancake. She ate her pancake. She was sitting on the counter in a Chicago Fire Department t-shirt, 3 sizes too big, that a paramedic named Ochoa had given her, because her own shirt had somebody else's blood on the sleeve, and nobody had wanted to explain that to an 8-year-old at midnight. Ethan flipped the third one and watched his hands do it, and noticed distantly that they were shaking again. They hadn't shaken once between 10:17 and 11:20. They'd started up in the parking garage, and they hadn't stopped since. Dad? Yeah. Are you going to jail? The spatula stopped. Why would you ask me that? Because a police lady said we're going to need to talk to your father, and she used the voice. What voice? The voice grown-ups use when it's bad. Ethan turned the burner off. He came over and put both hands on the counter on either side of her. Listen to me. I'm not going to jail. I'm going to have to answer a lot of questions for a lot of days, and some of those people are going to be rude, and some of them are going to be on television. And it's going to be boring and long, and I'm still going to pick you up at 3:15. Every day. Every day. Promise. And Ethan Cole, who had made exactly 2 promises in 11 years, and both of them in the last 5 hours, said promise. At 6:15 that morning, there were 14 news vans on his street. At 6:20, his phone rang for the first time. At 6:22 he turned it off, and that was the last quiet hour he got for 4 months. By Monday, it had a name. The papers were calling it the Meridian Siege, and the Meridian Siege had a hero, and the hero had a face, because a woman named Carla Diaz had filmed 40 seconds of a man carrying a girl through a police line, and it had been viewed 61 million times by Sunday night. By Wednesday, someone had found the record. They unsealed it, Agent Torres said. They can't unseal it. They didn't. Somebody leaked it. She slid a folder across a table in a federal building on Dearborn. Mr. Cole, I want to be straight with you. 20 minutes ago, your service history went up on 3 outlets. Deployments Unit Commendations. 2 silver stars. Ethan didn't touch the folder. Who leaked it? We don't know yet. Guess. Torres was quiet for a second. Reginald Sloane's people retained Halleck and Vance on Sunday morning, she said. Halleck and Vance has 4 former assistant directors on the letterhead. So it's them. I said I don't know. Agent Torres. Ethan finally looked up. Why would a man's own defense team publish the war record of the guy who stopped him? Because, Torres said slowly, a janitor who saved 300 people is a witness, and a decorated special operations veteran with a dead wife and a leave of absence in his file is a narrative. At 9:40 on Thursday morning, Victoria Hayes watched a cable segment in which a man in a very good suit used the word unstable 11 times in 6 minutes and threw a coffee cup at her own television. Get me the Tribune, she said. Victoria. Get me Diane Okafor. Victoria, your lawyer said. My lawyers said a lot of things in 2021 and I'm still here. She was already dialing. They're building him into a maniac before he ever sits in a chair. In 6 weeks a juror is going to hear the name Ethan Cole and think soldier who snapped, not on my life. What are you going to do? I'm going to give them a better story, Victoria said. And it's going to be true, which they won't know how to fight. At 4:10 that afternoon, she called him herself, Mr. Cole. Ethan. Ethan, I want to put you in front of a camera. No. You didn't hear the call. No. They are going to bury you. Ms. Hayes. Victoria. Victoria. He exhaled. I've got a kid who's sleeping in my bed because she won't sleep in hers. I've got a landlord who wants to know why there are cameras on his sidewalk. I've got a supervisor at the hotel who called me Tuesday to ask if I still wanted my shifts, and I said yes, and he said, and I'm quoting the man, "You sure?" A pause. You want me to go on TV and be a hero. I want you to go on TV and be a father, which is what you actually are, and let 60 million people see the difference. And what does that do for you? Victoria Hayes was silent for a moment. That's fair, she said. It wasn't a shot. It was a fair one anyway. Yes. It helps me. Everything that makes you credible makes my evidence credible, and everything that makes you a lunatic makes me a woman who was rescued by a lunatic. She took a breath. But that's not why I called. Then why? Because on Tuesday, your daughter's school got 4 calls from people who were not journalists, Victoria said. And I found that out before you did, and I would like to know why. The line went completely silent. Say that again, Ethan said. At 5:02 p.m., Ethan Cole stood in the front office of Ravenswood Elementary and made a woman named Denise Petrakis pull the visitor log. Sir, I really can't. Ma'am, I'm not asking for a name. I'm asking if anyone came in person. Mr. Cole. Did anyone come in person? Denise Petrakis looked at the log, then at him, then at the log again. Wednesday, she said quietly. 11:40. He said he was from the district doing a safety audit after the hotel. He had a badge on a lanyard. He asked which class had the little girl from the news. What did you tell him? I told him to leave, she said, and then I locked the front door, and I called the police, and they took a report, and nobody has called me back. Ethan put both hands flat on the counter and stood there for 4 full seconds. Thank you, he said. Mr. Cole. Yeah. Is she in trouble? And Ethan Cole heard himself say in a voice that came from somewhere 11 years old, No ma'am, he is. At 7:20 that evening, he called Torres, and Torres called a supervisor, and by 9 o'clock, there were 2 agents parked on his street, and Ethan Cole sat on the edge of his daughter's bed for the entire night without sleeping, and understood something he had been avoiding for 6 days. It wasn't over. The building had stopped burning. The men were in custody. And none of that had ever been the point, because the point was a phone call at 11:23, and the man on the other end of it was 79 years old and sleeping in a house in Lake Forest with 9 bathrooms and a very good lawyer. At 8 Husro the next morning, he called Victoria Hayes back. I'll do the interview. Ethan. Not for you, not for the case. He watched his daughter eat cereal at a table 12 feet away. I want him to see my face and understand that hiding stopped working. That's exactly why I wanted it. I know, he said. That's why I'm mad about it. At 11:15 on a Sunday morning, 41 million people watched a man in a plain gray shirt sit down across from a network anchor and answer questions for 22 minutes. Mr. Cole, you were a Navy SEAL. I was. 2 silver stars. That's what the paperwork says. You left in 2015. Yes. Why? My wife got sick. And after she passed, I had a 4-year-old, Ethan said, and she didn't need an operator. She needed somebody who knew how she liked her sandwiches cut. There are people saying you should be given a medal. There are 309 people who got out of that building. 280 of them got out because a man named Damian Kessler held a door open and a man named Marco Reyes took a wheelchair apart with his hands. Ethan looked directly at the camera for the only time in the entire broadcast. Both of those men are criminals. Both of those men are going to prison. Both of those things are true at once, and I'm not going to sit here and simplify it for anybody. Mr. Cole, some have suggested that you were, quote, looking for a fight that night. I was looking for a table, Ethan said. The restaurant was full. At 11:39, Reginald Sloan turned off a television in Lake Forest and said to nobody, "Get me Halleck." At 2:00 p.m. on the 14th of the following month, a federal grand jury in the Northern District of Illinois returned a 41-count indictment, and the twist that broke it open was not Victoria Hayes's hard drive. It was a shoebox. Say that again, Torres said. A shoebox, the AUSA repeated. Kessler's attorney walked it in this morning. 206 micro-recorder files, 22 years. Of what? Of every call he ever took. Damian Kessler had told Victoria Hayes in an executive suite at 10:09 at night that he had arranged to be a more expensive loose end to tie off than most, and Victoria Hayes had assumed at the time that he was posturing. He had not been posturing. He recorded his own clients, Torres said. Every one, since 2004. Why would a man do that? Because the AUSA said he intends to eventually be arrested by us and he wants something to sell. 9 of those files were dated inside a 4-month window, and 9 of those files contained a voice, and on the 6th of them, at 41 seconds, an old man's voice said unmistakably and without hedging, "I don't want a negotiation. I want an absence." At 4:45. That afternoon, Victoria Hayes sat in a conference room and listened to it 7 times. On the 7th, she started crying, which she had not done once, not in the ballroom, not in the executive suite, not with a knife 11 feet away. "Ms. Hayes, I'm fine. We can take a break." I said I'm fine. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, the same gesture, the exact same one. 6 years, and I couldn't get him past a shell company, and a man I met while he was holding a rifle on me hands you a shoebox. Ma'am, do you know what that means? That we have him. That means. Victoria said that the only reason Reginald Sloan goes to prison is that he hired a man who trusted him exactly as little as I did. At 9:20. The next morning, Ethan Cole was subpoenaed, and 11 days after that, a lawyer named Curtis Vance sat him in a deposition room and spent 4.5 hours trying to make him angry. "Mr. Cole, how many men did you injure that night?" 4. "You seem certain." "I am." "Do you enjoy it?" "No." "Have you ever?" "Once," Ethan said. The room went very still. Beside him, his own attorney put a hand flat on the table. "Once," Vance repeated. "In a linen room on the first floor at about 10:17, Ethan said. "For about 9 seconds it felt like something I used to be good at. And then I sat down on the floor because my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't stand up, and I thought about my daughter, and I got up, and I went and opened a door." He looked at Vance. "You want that on the record?" "Put it on the record. I'm not embarrassed by it. Every man who's ever done it knows what I'm talking about, and every man who hasn't will never understand it no matter how you word the question." Vance changed subjects. "Mr. Cole, isn't it true that you have never sought treatment for post-traumatic stress?" "That's true." "Doesn't that concern you?" "It concerns me a great deal," Ethan said. "I started in March. Tuesdays 11 o'clock, a VA clinic on Damon with a Dr. Aluko. I'd have started 9 years ago if I could have gotten a childcare slot. He tilted his head. You want her notes, you'll have to fight for them. But don't stand there and tell people I'm dangerous because I didn't get help, and also that I'm damaged because I did. Pick one. At 3:12 that afternoon, Curtis Vance ended the deposition 90 minutes early. At 6:00 that evening, Walter Briggs opened his apartment door in a bathrobe and said, "You look like hell." "Thanks. Come in. Don't touch anything." Ethan came in. It was a one-bedroom in Uptown, with 40 years of a marriage still hanging on the walls, and a recliner with a groove worn into it, and a stack of unopened mail on the counter that was 6 inches high. "Walter, don't start. That's your mail. That's my mail, and it is none of your business. You haven't opened it in a month." "I've been busy being famous," Walter said. "Sit down. There's a game on." Ethan sat. They watched 11 minutes of a Cubs game neither of them cared about. Then Walter said without turning his head, "They want me to testify." "I know. About the girl, about the pointing. I know. I don't want to." Ethan looked over. "Why not?" "Because I've got to stand up in a room and say out loud that 100 people pointed at an 8-year-old to save their own skins," Walter said. "And then those 100 people have to go home and live in the same city as me. And most of them ain't bad. That's the part that's got me." He rubbed his knee. "2 of them sent me cards. One of them was the woman doing the pointing." "What did it say?" "It said, 'I'm sorry I have a granddaughter.'" Walter's jaw worked. "That's the whole card, front and back." Ethan was quiet. "You know what I keep thinking about," Walter said. "I keep thinking if my Ruthie'd been in that room, would I have pointed? No. You don't know that." "Walter." Ethan turned in the chair. "You stood up in front of 300 people with a bad knee, and you roared at them, and then you took a rifle in the chest and told a man he'd have to shoot you, and then you carried my daughter through a loading dock, and then you came back inside." His voice cracked once and he let it. "I've known a lot of brave men. I've buried some of them. I have never in my life seen anything like what you did in that ballroom." Walter Briggs looked at the television for a long time. "Well," he said, "it was Friday. I had nothing on." At 10:15 on a Tuesday morning in October, Reginald Sloane sat down in a hallway outside a courtroom on the 25th floor of the Dirksen building, and Ethan Cole walked past him. He almost made it. "Mr. Cole." Ethan stopped. Sloane was smaller than the pictures. That was the first thing. 79 years old in a chair with a cane he clearly didn't need, and a lawyer 6 feet away pretending to read a phone. "Sir, I've been advised not to speak with you." "Then don't speak," Sloane said. "Listen. It takes 30 seconds, and then you'll never hear from me again in your life." Ethan should have walked. He didn't. "I want you to know," Sloane said, "that I never gave an instruction concerning your daughter. Not one. Not to any man in that building, and not to anyone after. There was a man at her school. There was a man at her school who worked for a firm that works for a firm," Sloane said. "And when I learned about it, I made a telephone call and it stopped. That is the truth, and you may check it however you like. You want a thank you? No. Then what do you want?" And Reginald Sloane, who owned $400 million of Chicago and had 11 days of his life left as a free man, said, "I want to know how you did it, not the building. Anyone can learn a building." He leaned forward on the cane. "I have spent 61 years learning what every man wants. Every single one. I have never once been wrong. And I want to know what I could have offered you." Ethan looked at him. "Nothing," he said. "Everyone has a number." "You already know I don't." "How?" "Because I make $31,000 a year, and I went back into a building I knew was rigged," Ethan said, "after my daughter was already out. You've had 6 months to figure out why, and it's killing you." Sloane's hands tightened on the cane. "Tell me." "You wouldn't understand the answer." "Try." And Ethan Cole crouched down so that he was eye level with a 79-year-old man in a courthouse hallway and said it quietly, the way you say something to someone who is about to lose everything. "There were 309 people in that ballroom, and none of them belong to me, he said. That's the whole thing. That's the entire answer. You've spent 61 years asking what people want. I was raised by a man who only ever asked what people needed, and he made $42,000 a year fixing boilers, and he died with 11 people at his funeral, and every one of them cried. Sloan said nothing. You could have offered me $100 million, Mr. Sloan, Ethan said, standing up. And I'd have taken it. I'd have taken it in a second. I'd have paid off a Ford and moved my kid out of a school with 300 kids in it and slept for a week. Then I'd have gone back into the building anyway, Ethan said. That's what you can't price. Not the no. The and then anyway. He walked into the courtroom. He did not look back, and Reginald Sloan sat in that hallway for 4 more minutes before his own lawyer had to come and get him. At 2:41 p.m. on the 4th of December, a jury convicted Reginald Sloan on 36 of 41 counts, including 4 counts of murder for hire and 1 count that carried a mandatory minimum, and he was sentenced in March to a term of years that a 79-year-old man does not finish. At 2:44 p.m. in this gallery, Victoria Hayes did not celebrate. She sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes closed and thought about 22 names and the fact that only 9 of them had made it into an indictment, and that she was going to spend the next decade on the other 13. At 10, outside, a reporter asked her how it felt. It doesn't feel like anything yet, she said. Ms. Hayes, ask me in a year. Damien Kessler was sentenced to 31 years, which his attorney called a betrayal, and which the prosecutor called generous, and which Kessler himself accepted without comment. On the day of his sentencing, he was permitted to make a statement, and the statement was 11 words long. I told 300 people nothing would happen to them, he said. I was wrong before I was right, and being right at the end doesn't clear it. Marco Reyes was sentenced to 9 years reduced for cooperation. On the day he was sentenced, a letter was read into the record from a 74-year-old man who had once stood in front of him and dared him to shoot, asking the court to remember that this man had put down a rifle when nobody was making him. Walter Briggs testified for 18 minutes and stepped down and shook, and Ethan Cole met him at the rail and walked him out with a hand under his elbow, and neither of them ever discussed it again. At 9:00 a.m. on a Saturday in April, the Meridian Fund held its first event, and Victoria Hayes stood up in front of 200 people and did the single most uncomfortable thing she had done since a man put her face down on a marble desk. I need to correct something, she said. The room went quiet. For 8 months, every profile of me has said that I survived that night because I was clever, that I read the room, that I turned one of them. She looked down at her notes and then put them aside. I want to say plainly that I survived because a maintenance worker sat down to dinner with his kid at the wrong restaurant, and because a 74-year-old widower with a bad knee liked the bread pudding, and because a man named Marco Reyes has a 6-year-old son. She looked up. None of that is a system. That's the part that keeps me awake. 309 people went home that night on a series of coincidences, and I have decided that I am not comfortable living in a world that runs on coincidences. The Meridian Fund put $14 million into 2 things, and only 2 things. Transitional support for combat veterans in the first 36 months after separation, which is the window in which most of them come apart. And emergency child care and housing grants for single parents, because Victoria Hayes had learned in a deposition that Ethan Cole had not sought treatment for 9 years, for the specific reason that there was nobody to watch his daughter on a Tuesday morning, and she had gone back to her office after reading that transcript and sat in the dark for an hour. At 9:31, she introduced him. He hadn't wanted to come. He'd said no 3 times. I'm not going to make a speech, Ethan said at a podium in a suit he'd bought that week. I want to say 2 things, and then I'm going to go stand in the back. Nobody moved. The first one is that everybody in this room has decided I'm a hero, and I've stopped arguing about it because it makes people upset. But I want you to understand what actually happened in that hotel. He gripped the sides of the podium. I was under a table with my kid, and I did not want to get up. I want that on the record somewhere. I have never wanted anything less in my entire life than I wanted to get up from under that table. Somebody in the 3rd row started crying. The second thing is about a promise. Ethan's voice went rough, and he waited it out. 11 years ago, I told my wife I'd be there, and I got there 4 hours late, and I made myself a rule after that, which was that I would never promise anyone anything ever again. And I kept that rule for 11 years. I kept it so well that my daughter grew up with a father who wouldn't promise her Christmas. He looked out at 200 people, and at about 9:50 in that ballroom, an 8-year-old asked me to promise her pancakes. The room did not make a sound. So I want to tell you what I actually did that night since we're doing awards, Ethan said. I didn't save anybody. I kept an appointment. At 11:20 that morning in the back of a hotel ballroom that was not the Grand Meridian, Victoria Hayes found him standing by a service door. Force of habit, she said. Best seat in the house. There's no TV. Ethan laughed out loud, which he had not done in front of another adult in a very long time. You've been waiting 8 months to use that. 7. I thought of it in March. She stood beside him. I have a job offer for you, and you're going to say no. I'm going to say no. $240,000 a year director of operations, you'd never lift a wrench again. No. Why? Because I'm good at fixing things, Ethan said, and I'm bad at meetings, and because my daughter has friends in that school now, and because a man who takes a job like that stops being the guy who got up from under the table and starts being the guy who tells other people to. Victoria nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Then here's the second offer, and this one's not a job. Go ahead. Dinner, sometime. No cameras, no lawyers, no Reginald Sloane. She kept her eyes forward. I have not had one conversation in 8 months with a person who was in that building, and I've discovered that I can't explain it to anybody who wasn't. Ethan was quiet for a second. There's a diner on Clark, he said. Terrible coffee. My kid comes with me. I'd like to meet your kid. She'll ask you about 100 questions. Good, Victoria Hayes said. I've got 100 answers and nowhere to put them. At 3:15 the Thursday afternoon, Ethan Cole stood at a chain-link fence outside Ravenswood Elementary with 14 other parents and waited for a bell. Nobody recognized him. That had taken almost a year, and he had waited for it the way other men wait for a raise. Cole. Hey, Denise. You're early. I'm always early. You're the only one. Denise Petrakis handed him a flyer. Fun runs the 9th. We need dads. I'll bring the old man. Mr. Briggs still coming Tuesdays. Every Tuesday. He reads to the second graders, and then he tells them about Nixon, and then somebody has to stop him. The bell rang. 200 kids came through a door like water through a break in a levee, and one of them 9 years old now with a backpack too big for her, and one sock blue and one sock gray, spotted him and ran. Dad? Hey, Bug. Mrs. Kowalczyk said I can do the science fair with Priya. That's great. But it needs a volcano, and the volcano needs a dad. The volcano needs a dad. That's what Priya said. Priya has a dad. Priya's dad is an accountant, Lily Cole said with the enormous contempt of a 9-year-old, and Ethan Cole laughed so hard he had to stop walking. They went east toward the car, and she put her hand in his without being asked, which she had started doing in November and had never once explained. Dad? Yeah. It's Friday. It's Thursday. It's almost Friday. That's not a thing. It's a thing if you love me. Ethan Cole stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and looked down at his daughter, and 11 years of a man being carefully, quietly, permanently afraid, finally set itself down somewhere and stayed there. Pancakes, he said. Really? Burned edges. You promise. And her father, who had once been a weapon and had chosen instead to be a man who showed up at 3:15, said the only thing he had ever needed to say. I promise. He never broke another one as long as he lived.